Welcome to the UCLA Distinguished Lecture Series in the Humanities, this year featuring Manfred Heiting. This special series allows us to bring distinguished scholars to campus to address the UCLA academic community and the broader Los Angeles public. The Division of Humanities is very pleased to welcome Manfred Heiting, an internationally renowned expert on and collector of photographs and especially of photography books. He'll be addressing three topics over the course of three lectures. First, what is an original photograph? Second, what is a photo book? And finally, what is a photo exhibition? Throughout the series, Manfred explores how the many modes of presentation of photography affect our experience of the art form. Manfred began his professional life as a designer, and between 1965 and 1982 was art director and later director of design at Polaroid International in Amsterdam. Since 1975, he has curated and organized over 50 exhibitions, including the history of instant photography. Manfred served as a founding member of the J. Paul Getty Museum Council. Since 1975, he has built a world-class encyclopedic collection on the history of photography and of photo books themselves. I hope you'll enjoy learning from Manfred's expertise in these lectures as much as I have enjoyed learning from him during the course of many conversations. Without further ado, please welcome Manfred Heiting.
Good evening and welcome. Standing on the shoulders of my mentors and many of my peers, it is a great honor for me, and I'm indeed very grateful to the incredible generosity of the university, the Department of Humanities, Dean Scharberg and his team with Megan Kissinger, and of course, Professor George Baker, to make these lectures happen. I also want to thank my friend Rick Ehrlich. He is emeritus professor and an important medical doctor at UCLA, but he is also a very accomplished photographer and my most valuable sponsor for these events. Rick, thank you very much. But it is a real pleasure to be with you here tonight and to share with you one of my core beliefs that have shaped during my 50 years working in the field of photography. Learn how to see, and I loved every moment of it. And of course, this is not only instrumental in the field of photography. It is fundamental requirements for anything we treasure in all visual arts and all aspects of our culture, our heritage and perspective of history, and in the interaction with the people around us, and not at least with our family and loved ones. But most important to you here tonight, seeing is a vital aspect of learning itself. Learning how to look each other in the eye, understanding the other person and their feelings, understanding other cultures, other faiths, and other beliefs. But my series of lectures here are only about seeing by looking at photographs, photo books, and photo exhibitions. And I hope that at the end of these three lectures, you will have a different understanding and maybe have a different appreciation when you look at original photographs, a photographic print, look at a photo book in a library or in a bookstore, or go to a museum or gallery to see a photo exhibition. To help me to start this dialogue with you, let me share one of the most important quote I learned from John Ruskin. And I quote, "The greatest things a human soul ever does in this world is to see something and tell what it saw in a plain way. Hundreds of people can talk, for one who can sink, but 1,000 can sink for one who can see. To see clearly is poetry, prophecy, and religion all in one." End of quote. Indeed, a great quote from a great John Ruskin, who had so much to say as a great writer and artist, but especially as a leading art critic of his time. He is often quoted in relation to photography, but this quote sums it all up so perfectly. He was also there when photography was invented and saw it changing society completely. Today's presentation, the first one of a total of 3, will focus on the original photographic print. What is it? How do we look at it? And what it is that the eye of an expert and a connoisseur sees what maybe others don't. But also, what should we know about its making, its technical requirements, and what determines its importance, its value, and its collectability. And remember, photography is art and craft, not only the one, not only the other. At this point, I need to make a disclaimer. I'm not, at any time, refer in my presentation to photographic images or prints created by artists like David Hockney, Lucas Samaras, Ed Ruscha, Andy Warhol, and many others today when using the medium of photography as part of their work. When one stands in front of the Mona Lisa, the painting by Leonardo da Vinci at the Louvre in Paris, created between 1503 and 1517, everyone knows one stands in front of the original painting. Despite the thousands of books with illustrations of this painting and million more reproductions of it as posters, postcards, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and I'm sure as screensavers and more of that, no one would ever be confused in those instances and would doubt that with all these many images, one would indeed look at a copy or reproduction, and thus a far cry from the original. No one would ever question that the original painting is the one in the Louvre. And if one would want to have the experience and the excitement to stand before the original and look at it, one would need to go there. Punkt. Of course, sometimes one would have a hard time to have a close look. In photography, this is all different, at least for about 160 years. A photographic image is about capturing a subject or situation for which the photographer has frozen that image with an analog camera on a negative, and today, when using a digital device, on a digital file. In both instances, this could then be called the moment of creation of that event. But the analog photographer needs to make a print from that negative in the darkroom, or at least someone has to. And in our digital age, one would still have to make a digital print of that digital file to have the moment of the creation in your hand. Of course, it is simpler to look at an image on a monitor or a screen like you here today, but schlepping a large equipment around with you seems to be a bit too much. And a smartphone? Well, please. While Leonardo da Vinci painted only one Mona Lisa, Ansel Adams made over 1,000 prints of his Mona Lisa, called Moonrise. Ansel Adams one of the most important American photographers, also a writer and activist in the history of the medium, used to say, and I quote, "Photography is like music. The negative are the notes, and the print is a performance." And that is where the big difference starts. Where Leonardo da Vinci painted only one Mona Lisa, Ansel Adams made over 1,000 prints of his Mona Lisa, called Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico, taken in 1941. And endless performances have been made from notes by composers like Beethoven and his Symphony No. 9, completed in 1824. And although every print is made from the same negative, and every musical performance is conducted from the same notes, for one who can see, every print from the same negative, and for one who can hear, every performance from the same notes are different, even if slightly so, if not performed by a computer. So for every connoisseur in photography, and certainly in the field of photographic prints made in the 19th and 20th century, each print, each darkroom performance has to be considered an original photographic print. And if the informed collectors and museum curators will select one of those prints, they also consider that print to be the object of choice worth being in their collection. So then there are many original photographic prints from the same negative. Absolutely, yes, there are. But not every print is desirable or an object of choice for the real passionate and seasoned collector or museum curator. So there are several important factors that make an original photographic print an object. In order to bring some clarity and facts, however subjective or even provocative, to the field of photography and its great master images and prints, I like to share with you a few examples of original photographic prints and objects, and I will try to explain why some original prints are more interested than others. But also, each of the examples you will see on this screen will demonstrate a different aspect of a photographic original print and will most likely change your present understanding of what you might want to look for. At least that is what I hope. At the end of looking at all these examples, I will help you to know what is important, learn what to look for, and to make your decision and to choose the right print for you. And I promise you will be surprised. Let me first start to clear up some confusion about labeling a photograph a vintage print. Many experts assign vintage print to a print made by the photographer within 5 years or so after making the negative, and considering the fact that the maker could indeed still be aware of the captured event, the mood and inspiration in which the negative was made and created, at the time when he or she made the print, it seems a somewhat plausible definition for preference. But the attribution vintage print assigned to a photograph made in the 20th century, specifically before 1970, is primarily relevant to the photographic market. for the purpose of establishing a price. More to the point, this attribution is used when one wants to refer to the importance and higher quality of that print, and therefore more rare and more valuable than a print of the same image printed at a later date. However, depending on the period, the photographer, his or her skills in the darkroom, and the photographic paper on which the image was printed and conserved, this is often not correct, nor essential to its importance. I will come back to this later after you have seen some proofs. To better understand all this, I have selected a few examples of print performances from several important master photographers from the 19th century, the 1920s, and 1930s up to the post-war period. Gustave Le Gray, August Sander, Man Ray, Claude Cahoon, Paul Outerbridge, Ansel Adams, and Frederick Sommer, to make my arguments and even surprising counter-arguments. Just that you know, they are all dead and cannot disagree with me and what I will tell you about the work. The images you will see on the screen are carefully made reproductions detailing often only subtle differences of the selected original prints. And I will try to explain their differences and uniqueness in darkroom performances and why they are the preferred and collectible objects. Ansel Adams is a doyen of American nature and landscape photography, and he can be considered one of the best printer, if not the best. He is also a unique darkroom wizard. I mentioned already his most famous and celebrated photograph he ever took, so he made many hundreds of other great images. Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico, and I will indulge you to look at 3 different prints of this image made over a long period of time. The print you see here now on the screen is truly a vintage print, true to what I have reported on before, being what the experts say, and I need to add, quite unique. And of the more than 1,000 prints he made of that image, maybe there are only 2 or 3 prints like this, made between 1941 and 1943. He was not happy with the outcome early on. He called it too weak in the cloud portion of the sky, lacking the drama. He thought it was not representing his memorable experience, and he did not like the tonal range. So in the late 1950s, he started experimenting with a negative in his darkroom and treated and enhanced the negative, making the sky more dark, more dramatic, without losing too much of the cloud formation. What you see here is a print made around 1962, in other words, 20 years after the negative was made, and after he treated the negative, a bit more drama in the upper part of the sky, but still with most of the clouds. He continued to enhance the upper part of the negative, and in the 1970s, when he made most of the prints of this image, he topped the drama of the sky, even to the point of losing most of the upper clouds. The image you see here is one of these prints. This one made around 1975, more than 30 years after the negative was made. You may have lost track with your eyes to notice a difference, so in order to clearly see it, I show you all the 3 prints together on the screen. Here they are. Now you can choose the one you like best. The prints made all from the negative, the original negative, printed to a careful set of technical interpretation and of what Adams wanted to see accomplished. And these are all original photographic prints, but they are all quite different, made over a period of 30 years, and of course also on different papers. The first printed around 1946, the second around 1962, and the third one around 1975. So which one you would select as your favorite? But of course, the final choice, like beauty, will always be made by the eye of the beholder. And at an estimated price range between $50,000 and $250,000, not a regular decision you have to make. But it is not the vintage print which fetches the highest prices. So I believe you need to adjust to a different value, a different choice when you judge a vintage print. Let's now look at prints from the 1860s. In the 19th century, and in particular a few years after the invention of the medium and the new techniques to make multiple copies, no one had the knowledge and skills of Ansel Adams. Most of the early great masters of the medium came from painting. Every advancement in printmaking was accomplished step by step and mostly by trial and error. Gustave Le Gray was a painter, but not shy of experimenting with manipulating of what he saw in nature and how he could capture this and all the other elements with his new medium. We also need to remember that making a large print was difficult and expensive at the time, even for a painter like Le Gray. I have selected one of Le Gray's most famous images he made between 1856 and 1859. It is an albuminized salt paper print, but not from one negative, but from 2 wet collodium glass negatives. Here is a print for you to look at. It is a contact print, 12.5 by 16.5 inch in size. The glass negative were of course of the same size. The enlarger was not invented yet. Because of the long exposure time and to capture the image on the negative, Le Gray had to make 2 separate exposures with 2 negatives, one for the sky with the clouds and one for the water, and then had to match it together when making the final print. Not an easy task. Also, the chemicals used at the time were not always stable and could shift in color each time a print was made. So perfect knowledge of the material and the skills to apply these knowledge was essential. To make an acceptable result, it was painful work. This knowledge and skills, or the lack of it, also is a reason why you see so many different colors, shades of colors of the same image of the early prints, mostly in orange-brown when compared next to each other, and this in addition and beyond the color fading of the print over time. Needless to say, every print is different. This is the same image in the same size from the same 2 glass negatives, but in a very different color and much more dramatic. Actually, this is an incredible print and is also a very rare color for a print made by Le Gray. Seeing them together on the screen will give you an advantage to decide which one you would select. One additional important and reassuring aspect about 19th century original photographic prints is there are no later prints, made by the photographers at least. Of course, the photographers made prints over a period of several years, but most likely only every period, maybe over a decade. Since it was never an easy task to make a print at the time, and many of the new photographers who already came late in their life to embrace the new medium and excelled in it, going back to an old negatives and make a rare print, a new print, was never an option for them. Those two prints and all the prints made from the same two negatives are, of course, original photographic prints, and each one of them most unique but very different. Collecting and treasuring 19th century photography is a pleasure for every connoisseur with historical and technical knowledge. Although there have been a few instances of fraud, new prints from original negatives made by skillful master forgers, this field has left a very small footprint. There are very few forgeries, and it's mostly free of market manipulation. So look into it. The following prints that we look at are made by Paul Outerbridge. Paul Outerbridge was a most acclaimed and very successful commercial photographer in the 1920s, and he experimented extensively with the three-color cardboard process in the 1930s. He printed his most important black and white work in platinum palladium, but also some image on gelatin silver paper. As most photographers at the time, he only made a few prints of most of his images. During the 1930s, he devoted himself to the three-color cardboard process, which he used for his commercial assignments, often commissioned by Condé Nast and other magazines at the time. In 1940, he published a book on his color work and his cardboard process, after which he somehow disappeared from the field and never made a memorable image after that. I have selected two of his most known images for you. Here is the Eyed Color, a black and white photograph commissioned by the Eyed Company in New York in 1922. And the other, his most famous and unique cardboard print, Woman with Claws, he made in 1937. I also have a surprise for you. I will show you an image he actually never made a print of because he could not. And I will explain it to you further on. What you see here is a platinum print of the Eyed Color. There are also only 9 known to exist. It was a very, very popular image at the time because of the advertisement and a very expensive print today. The prints were also small, only 4.5 by 3.5 inch, rich in tonality, and with a soft rendition, which is a signature quality of a platinum print. This is the same image, but printed as a gelatin silver print, and about 10 years later. An unique and also quite large print. This one 13.5 by 10.5 inch. The rendition is crisp and sharp, as it is with every gelatin silver print, more in line with the new objectivity that became the credo of Rengapatsch in Germany at the end of the 1920s. If you look at the two prints side by side, you will see more clearly the descripted differences. And of course, size matters too. These two prints are both original photographic prints, but also made in a very different technique and on very different paper, and about 10 years apart after the negative was created. The most desired objects are the platinum prints. However, the gelatin silver print is a unique object. Again, which print would you prefer? This is a carbo print made by Outerbridge that for some of you may look familiar, but it is not what you think it is. Yes, it is indeed women with claws, but he did not like what he saw when he printed the 3 negatives, and he never showed this image to anyone. Maybe it was not going enough under your skin, or as he once wrote, a photograph should do something, or a good kick in the pants. I can only guess that it was not good enough for him. But because the carbo process was also very complicated, he could not easily make a new one. Just another print, too complicated. To make sure you understand the process and his dilemma, I will show you the 3 negatives taken by Outerbridge to make this print. These are the 3 negatives taken by Outerbridge for women with claws which have survived and are now in the collection of Graham Howe. But as you can imagine, to make a perfect print from these 3 negatives, and in a result you saw before, he needed to match the 3 negatives perfectly in the enlarger, certainly not a cakewalk. Here is again the print he made, but he didn't like. But Outerbridge was an experienced commercial photographer, so he edited the image and matted it without the woman's head and elbows, and glued the mount to the image to become nearly inseparable. So all the world knows is this matted version. But of course, the persons or institution who at one point owned the print knew the unmatted version. I was fortunate enough to have acquired this print from G.R.A. Hawkins' gallery around 1982, and it is now in the Getty Museum collection. But the print was not acquired from me. And you can go there and look for yourself, but make an appointment. Okay, I told you before that I would show you a print that Outerbridge could not have made at the time. Here it is, an entirely different print situation surrounding this Outerbridge image. It does not exist in any print form. Only the 3 glass negatives have survived. It seems that Outerbridge was not able to make a print of it. Why? If you remember, the process of making a print from 3 different color negatives is difficult to match in the enlarger. We also have here 2 beautiful women as a subject. It may entirely be possible that one had moved during the making of the 3 negatives. But today we can rematch the negative on a computer, and new perfect digital files can be made, and a print can be made, and that is what I did. And you can see an original photograph by Outerbridge on this screen, which he never saw. I could also make digital prints of it. Would this then be an original print? I leave the answer open. Let's move on to Man Ray. Man Ray can be called one of the most creative and innovative photographer and artist of the 20th century. He also was a painter, if not a very good one. He moved to Paris after World War I and was there when and where the most important isms were founded: Cubism and Surrealism. Paris in the 1920s, was the breeding ground of 20th century's art, literature, and fashion. And Man Ray was right in the middle of all these photographers and movements, right in the center of every aspect of life and pleasure in that city. I have selected one of his many famous nude photographs for you to see. This one of Man Ray's famous nude is a solarized gelatin silver print. The negative was made around 1930. A very interesting print indeed, but quite harsh and contrasty, and not soft and lush and velvet-like as an image would require. But then if you look at the back, you see that it is a posthumous print. It was made by the Man Ray estate in the 1970s, shortly after his death. Yes, and an original photographic print with an original estate stamp from an original negative, and most likely printed by the same printer that Man Ray used in his later years. After the war, Man Ray never printed his own prints. A great image, but not a print of a master's choice. Okay, here is then the master's choice. What a difference. This is a real deal, a real object, made around 1932, soft, lush, and velvet-like, the print you want to have, and I'm sure you agree. The print on the left represents what certainly comes in mind when one refers to a vintage print. However, both prints are original photographic prints. But also remember, not many people have the opportunity to look at two different original prints of the same negative being made more than 40 years apart, next to each other. Very, very difficult. Like you see here today, you are lucky. And also you will then understand the underlying facts why there is so much difference. With these two examples, one very important aspect and fact of the so-called vintage print has to be noted and explained, as I mentioned to you earlier in my presentation. It's all about the photographic paper. During the time between World War I and World War II, the manufacturing of photographic paper was at its highest commercial, technical, and chemical quality, giving the photographers endless choices for how to make a print, what kind of silver content, what kind of paper surface, matte, shiny, high gloss, structured, thin, medium, or board weight, and everything in between. But also which color tonality, which gradation, all these features that would influence the look, the feel, and the appearance of the image on the print, which eventually makes the object. All these choices and attributes of photographic paper lasted until around 1956, until the EPA made its famous ruling. Yes, the EPA made it eventually impossible to manufacture photographic paper in the quality known from the time between the wars. And we gradually slipped into a bit less of cotton to no cotton, a little bit less silver to no silver, and finally to plastic. The EPA and the Water Pollution Control Act amendments, effective in 1956, are important facts to know for any connoisseur and any museum curator. After this date, the high quality of photographic paper was gradually but substantially reduced. The increased price of silver played an additional negative effect in the coming years. Paper mills were high water polluter and were also trying to produce more efficient and economical manufacturing techniques to address the increasing demand of photographic paper. and already started since the beginning of the 1950s to include an optical brightener to extend the paper's tonal range on the cheap, which would make the paper glow under black light. So every gelatin silver print made by any photographer before World War II and every gelatin silver print from a negative made after World War II, but printed on paper manufactured before 1956, is and will always the most desirable print and superior print than any print made after this date, after this period, because of the photographic paper. And, in my opinion, this would be the only reason of distinction for calling all these early prints manufactured before 1956 vintage print. I also dare to say that in most cases, the quality of a print made on paper manufactured after 1956 had nothing to do anymore with the darkroom skills of the photographer or the age or his printer, but was a result of the reduced and inferior quality of the photographic paper manufactured after this date. Because of the shelf life of photographic papers and the rapidly increased demand for it, it is arguable around 1970 that all prints made after this date had also no influence anymore on the quality of the print. They all looked the same. But of course, the new paper manufacturing was also much more friendlier to the environment. Okay, now let's have another look at August Sander, one of the greatest portrait photographers of all times. His major accomplishment was the topology of the German people, which he captured in more than 60 years of his active career. Sander, his studio and family, can be compared with Edward Weston and his studio and family. Both are unique in the history of photography. Their families are continuing the printing of the original negatives into the third generation. Both of the last family member printer are still alive and active. What I'm going to show you is one image which is part of Sander's extensive work on children. What is odd to this series is the fact that August Sander made only a few prints of many of these negatives, and of some he never did. Gunther Sander, his son, reportedly made only a few prints from the same negatives. Only his grandson, Gerd Sander, did fill in all the gaps. He made a limited set of 12 selected images in the 1990s from those negatives that neither August Sander or Gunther Sander made prints of. And after they both had died, this one and an additional 11 images are without doubt part of the highlights of August Sander's life work of children. And if one would like to have one of these images, one have to accept the fact that these prints were made posthumously. All these prints are certified by the August Sander Archive and signed by Gerd Sander. And this one and all the other 11 prints made in the 1990s are all original photographic prints. It is now important to reflect here on what is happening today in photography. Young collectors, but also more and more museums, are collecting important, memorable images, not the object. Just a hard copy of an image, a stunning proof of how important the image has become in a collection. The Museum of Modern Art in New York, in 2015, acquired a complete set of August Sander's People of the 20th Century, a survey of the German people, about 690 prints. The prints for this purchase were made by Gerd Sander, reportedly for between $1.5 and $2 million. Maybe this is a sign that the time of our addiction to vintage print as we know it is over. Another entirely different experience of original prints that I'd like to share with you is from the work of Claude Cahoon. Cahoon was an artist, photographer, and writer, part of the French Surrealist movement, and a major feminist at the time. Her work, both political and personal, were often undermined the traditional concepts of gender roles. She was undoubtedly an inspiration to Cindy Sherman. Cahoon worked in Paris in the 1920s and 1930s until she left in 1937 to settle with her partner, Suzanne Malherbe, on the island of Jersey in the British Channel, where she died in 1954. Cahoon's most important body of work, photo collages, were first published in the book Aveux non avenus in 1930. What you see here is a reproduction from one of her collages, a heliogravure printed in this book. The size is about 7 by 4 inch. No original gelatin silver print of the collages are known to exist. In the tradition of French bibliographies and bibliophiles, the book had several limited editions, and all are numbered, topped by the information that copy number 1 was assigned to Cahoon herself and came with an original print made from the collage. We do not know if all the original collages used in the reproduction in this publication have actually survived. After extensive research, I became aware of one original collage being in the collection of the Australian National Museum. From that original collage, we know its original size, about 20 by 16 inch. In the early 1970s, part of the archive of Claude Cahoon was auctioned off in Jersey with little international notice. Part of it was Cahoon's copy of Aveux non avenus, number 1. I acquired this lot in 2002, which came with another unidentified box. To my dismay and shock, her personal copy number 1 did not have original prints, but the mysterious box included 7 of the negatives made from the collages and used to print the book. Indeed, what a disappointment and what a trophy at the same time. It took me some years to try and make digital enlargements from these negatives and to match the size of the original collage. So here you see, for the first time, a print from the original negative which revealed the fine details of the collages never possible in printing of the book and never seen before. So it was possible for me to make digital enlargement to the size of the original collage. Looking at both prints side by side, as you can see here, the quality of the original negatives become quite convincing. A new and realistic question for every collector and museum curator, as well as for the photo historian: what print would be called the original when only the negatives exist? These digital prints are now featured in a major exhibition, The Clashes of the Gender, in the Steidl Museum in Frankfurt, one of the great museums in Germany. So the debate can begin. And finally, I will show you several prints made by another most respected photographer and printer in America, Frederick Sommer. He was born in Italy, raised in Brazil. He became a landscape architect before he started to work on paper and watercolors, drawings of musical scores, and finally becoming a photographer. He settled in Prescott, Arizona in 1935, where he died in 1999. Sommer was also an excellent technician in the darkroom. His prints achieved the highest acclaim from his peers, including Ansel Adams. To him, every print was indeed an original, and he made not so many prints of most of his not so many photographs. For him, the darkroom was the place of creation. I've chosen his most famous portrait of Livia he made in 1948. What you see here is a mounted print he gave to the sitter shortly after he photographed her. It's a small print measuring about 6.5 by 4 inch and a true vintage print. Actually, he made two slightly different exposures at the same time of the sitting. This print is identical in size to the first one, but slightly different in tonality and also in pose. When you see them side by side, you will see the difference. The one on the left is much lighter and the hands of the girls are open. The one on the right is somewhat darker and the hands are more closed. Sommer made no further prints of this apparently cropped image. The two prints come from the sitter. This is a print we all come to know and to love. It is an impressive, expressive portrait with incredible details in fore and background. The eyes of Livia are hypnotizing. But he also experimented with tonality of the prints, as you can see here. Here again, you can judge looking at two prints side by side. I owned one of these prints, one of my favorite Sommer print, but I also never saw the two prints together myself until making this presentation. Until 1975, he made quite a few prints from this negative, shown here, with variable degrees of lighter and darker results. Considering his technical skills and precision in printing, this was not by mistake, but intentionally, and demonstrating his own reflection at the time of the printing. After 75, he stopped printing himself and his studio continued under his supervision to make prints from that negative until he died in 1999. It is nearly impossible to notice a difference between the many prints made from the original negative over a period of 50 years, except for the noticeable loss of richness and in later prints, because of the difference in paper used. Here again, the attribution of vintage print has very limited, if not very little meaning. So with these two Livias, I'm coming to the end of my first presentation, and I'd like to make 6 conclusive remarks. First, a print from an original negative must be considered an original photographic print. It does not matter if the print was made by the photographer who made the original negative or by a person assigned by the photographer or by the family member during or after the photographer's life, or by a photographer's estate and certified as such, as long as it is within the proven practice of that photographer, family, or estate. It may be the signature or stamp of the photographer, or certification or other provenance requirements to prove that the print is made by an authorized person, is made from the original negative, and that the negative can be traced to be part of the photographer's work. It is therefore essential that one needs to know the photographer's life and his work to make an informed judgment of any of the images and or prints. The habit of most photographers to only use a negative date on the print is not very helpful, and today ill-advised. It is actually very alien to the medium. The print date is the most important date for an object. Both dates should be the norm. Second, as I have tried to demonstrate, a so-called vintage print is just not enough for the stated fact of authenticity, importance, or value. And one always needs additional qualifying explanation to make its intended case. Remember also that the exact time a print is made cannot be proven with certainty unless it is clearly stated on the print or a detailed knowledge of the print's provenance. And history and the technical information is known. Very few sources provide this information. Print dating is the most important part in the puzzle, but it is also not a warranty for the best print. Third, as I have shown you with these various original prints and their technical and sometimes aesthetics variations, there are many interpretations a photographer or his printer has applied to each print over the course of their life and often beyond that. One needs to look at each print with an informed eye and, if possible, to compare as many prints possible from the same negative before a final choice can be made. Fourth, again, remember that one of the most important aspects of any great print made by any great master photographer from any great negative is the quality of the photographic paper that was available and chosen for the print. Only then the knowledge and skills in the darkroom bear fruits and a great print is made. The fact is, for any print from any photographer made after 1970, it does not matter anymore when exactly the print were made, since the photographer's photographic paper used for printing the negative was then of very limited quality, and darkroom skills were less and less required. Basically, prints made after 1970 and from the same negative all look the same. Between you and me, the knowledge and darkroom skills of most photographers have also suffered by the increased number of prints made at the same time from the same negative. It is therefore my belief that after the 1970s, this was a time when we started to look more and more at the image and not anymore at the print. The object has died. 5. We live in a time of investment and profit maximization. And it seems that this is not anymore related to stocks and real estate only, but to art and to photography. Collecting is passion, whether you are a private collector or a curator in an institution. And both need to have knowledge, experience, and a guiding vision, and it will then become a final judgment of the object. Does it make sense to be included in one's collection? And at the end, the price of the print will always, and unfortunately, determine its acquisition. So, For the private collector, the question is, can I afford it? For the curator, the question is, can I raise the money? Number 6, and finally, if it is a digital print, only the image matters to make a choice. However, one needs to know more and additional information about a digital print as well. For an analog print, the brand of the paper used, the brand of the printer used, the number of colors, between 4 and 12, possible, and the order in which the colors are printed. No conservation and certainly no restoration can successfully be made in later years without this information. And since most prints today are made in color, make sure you have cool storage. Also, the facts are, a machine makes all the prints, and as many as you like, now or later, and they all will be identical. Whether you print the image for a book or for a wall, no craft or darkroom skills are needed anymore, just Photoshop. There is no original photographic print anymore, only original digital images, available on the internet, on websites, auction, at any place you can think of, and they all go on the market. So I like to close with a quote from another great writer and art critic of more recent times, Robert Hughes. He coined the phrase, I quote, "What strip mining is to nature, the art market is to culture." End of quote. However, I also believe that photographic original print, a print made in the darkroom, but also a digital print made by a digital device, can escape the dilemma of the art market if we all, private collector, museum curators, have or acquire the knowledge, understanding, and judgment, and learn how to see and then select the print on a vision and on principles for their collection. No museum, no collector needs all the supersized images made by Epson or Hewlett-Packard printers. Just because it is technically possible, and no collector, no curator, no historian needs to see, needs to know, or needs to have all the prints being offered to them today on a daily basis or are available on the market. Thank you.